A journey beyond the horizon. My name is Ben, and this is the story of how my life changed forever. It all started when I was just a young boy, living in a small village near the coast. Life was simple back then. The sea stretched out beyond the horizon, endless and mysterious. My father was a fisherman, and every day he would take his small boat out into the ocean, returning with the day's catch. I always admired him for his bravery, for facing the unpredictable waves and the unknown that lay beneath the surface. But while my father seemed content with his life on the water, I dreamed of something more, something beyond the horizon. From a young age, I was captivated by stories of distant lands, places full of adventure, danger, and excitement. The villagers would often tell tales of travelers who had crossed the seas, discovering new worlds, strange creatures, and hidden treasures. These stories sparked a fire inside me, a yearning to explore the world and seek out the unknown. But my father, practical and cautious as he was, did not share my enthusiasm. "Ben," he would say, "the sea is no place for dreams. It's dangerous out there, and not everyone returns. You must learn to be content with the life you have." His words were well-meaning, but they only fueled my desire to leave the village and chase the adventure that I knew was waiting for me. One night, as I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, I made a decision. I would leave. I didn't know where I was going or how I would get there, but I knew I couldn't stay in the village any longer. My heart was pulling me toward the unknown, and I had to follow it. The next morning, I packed a small bag with what little I had, some clothes, a loaf of bread, and a small knife my father had given me for fishing. I waited until my father was out at sea, then I slipped out of the house and made my way to the docks. I didn't have a boat of my own, but there were always merchant ships coming and going, and I hoped one of them would be willing to take me on as a deckhand or cabin boy. When I reached the docks, I saw a large ship preparing to set sail. It was unlike any ship I had ever seen before, sleek, fast, and built for long journeys. Its crew moved quickly, loading supplies and making last-minute preparations. I approached one of the sailors, a gruff-looking man with a scar across his cheek, and asked if they needed any help on board. He looked me up and down, then grunted. "You ever worked on a ship before, boy?" "No," I admitted, "but I'm a quick learner." He snorted. "We'll see about that. Get on board and stay out of the way." And just like that, I was part of the crew. The ship's name was the Silver Wind, and it was captained by a man named Captain Rowan. He was tall and imposing, with a thick beard and eyes that seemed to pierce through you. But despite his intimidating appearance, there was a kindness in him, a respect for the sea and for those who sailed with him. Over the next few weeks, I learned the ropes, literally. The work was hard and the days were long, but I didn't mind. Every day brought new sights, new challenges, and a sense of freedom that I had never felt before. As we sailed farther from the coast, the sea grew wilder. The waves became taller, the wind stronger. At night, I would lie in my small bunk, listening to the creaking of the ship as it was tossed by the waves, and wonder what lay ahead. The other sailors told stories of sea monsters, of storms so fierce they could tear a ship apart, and of islands that no man had ever returned from. But none of it scared me. If anything, it only made me more determined to see what was out there. One day, as we sailed deeper into the unknown, the lookout shouted from the crow's nest, "Land ho!" We rushed to the deck, straining our eyes to see. Sure enough, in the distance, there was a small, rocky island. It wasn't much to look at, just a barren piece of land in the middle of the ocean. But it was the first sign of land we had seen in weeks, and Captain Rowan decided we would stop there to rest and resupply. As we approached the island, I felt a strange unease. There was something about the place that didn't feel right, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. The air was thick with tension, and the sea around us seemed unnaturally still. The crew lowered the anchor, and a group of us, including the captain, rowed to shore in a small boat. The island was desolate, with jagged rocks and little vegetation. We split up to explore, with orders to meet back at the boat in a few hours. I wandered along the shore, picking up seashells and watching the waves crash against the rocks. But the further I went, the more I felt like I was being watched. I looked around, but there was no one there, just the wind and the sea. As I walked, I came across a cave entrance hidden among the rocks. It was dark and foreboding, but something drew me toward it. I stepped inside, my heart pounding in my chest. The cave was damp and cold, with the sound of dripping water echoing through the darkness. I lit a small lantern I had brought with me and continued deeper into the cave. After a few minutes, I saw something glinting in the darkness. I approached cautiously, and to my amazement, I found a chest, an old, weathered chest, covered in dust and seaweed. My hands trembled as I opened it, revealing a collection of strange artifacts. There were coins, jewels, and a map. But the most intriguing thing was a small, intricately carved stone. It was unlike anything I had ever seen before, with symbols and markings that I couldn't understand. I quickly stuffed the stone and the map into my bag, then hurried back to the boat. When I arrived, the others were already there, loading supplies onto the boat. I didn't tell anyone about the chest or the stone. Something about it felt too important, too personal. As we sailed away from the island, I couldn't stop thinking about the stone and the map. Where had they come from? What did the symbols mean? And why had I been the one to find them? Over the next few days, I became obsessed with the stone. I would sneak away during my free time to study it, trying to decipher the symbols. The map, too, was unlike any map I had ever seen. It didn't show any familiar landmarks, just a series of islands and strange markings. One night, as I was studying the map, Captain Rowan approached me. "What have you got there, lad?" he asked, his eyes narrowing. I hesitated, then showed him the stone and the map. To my surprise, he didn't seem angry. Instead, he studied them closely, a look of recognition in his eyes. "I've seen these symbols before," he said quietly. "They're part of an ancient legend, a legend about a lost civilization that once ruled the seas. They were said to possess great knowledge and power, but they disappeared long ago, leaving behind only a few relics. This stone, it could be a key to finding their lost city." I stared at him in disbelief. "A lost city? Do you really think it's real?" Captain Rowan nodded. "I don't know, but I've spent my whole life searching for it, and now, thanks to you, we might be closer than ever." And so, our journey took on a new purpose. We were no longer just sailing the seas. We were on a quest to find the lost city. The crew didn't know the full details, but they could sense the excitement and tension in the air. Every day we studied the map, trying to determine where it was leading us. The seas grew rougher, the skies darker, but we pressed on, driven by the promise of discovery. As the weeks passed, we encountered countless challenges, storms that nearly sank the ship, strange creatures that followed us through the water, and even rival ships that tried to chase us away. But nothing could stop us. We were on the brink of something incredible, and we knew it. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, we reached the location marked on the map. It was a small island, surrounded by treacherous reefs and violent waves. We could see the remains of an ancient city, half submerged in the water, its crumbling towers and statues hinting at the grandeur it once possessed. We anchored the ship and rowed to shore. The island was eerily quiet, the only sound the crashing of the waves against the rocks. As we explored the ruins, we found more artifacts, broken pieces of pottery, ancient coins, and strange carvings on the walls. But the stone I had found was the key. It fit perfectly into a slot in one of the statues, and when I placed it there, something incredible happened. The ground beneath us shook, and a hidden chamber opened up in the center of the ruins. Inside, we found a treasure beyond our wildest dreams: gold, jewels, and artifacts from the lost civilization. But there was something even more valuable: knowledge. Ancient scrolls and books that contained secrets about the world, about the sea, and about the power that this lost civilization had once wielded. As we descended into the hidden chamber, the air felt thick with history and mystery. The walls were lined with shelves of ancient scrolls, their brittle paper covered in the same strange symbols that had been etched into the stone. At the center of the chamber stood a large pedestal, and on it lay a book bound in dark leather, its pages yellowed with age. It was clear that this was no ordinary treasure. This was knowledge that had been lost to the world for centuries. Captain Rowan approached the pedestal slowly, his eyes wide with awe. This is what we've been searching for," he whispered, as if afraid to disturb the silence of the chamber. He reached out to touch the book, his fingers trembling with excitement. But as he did, a deep rumble echoed through the chamber. The ground beneath us began to shake, and dust fell from the ceiling. "Captain!" I shouted. "We need to get out of here." But the captain was frozen in place, his eyes locked on the book. "No," he said, his voice barely audible. "This is what I've been looking for my whole life. We can't leave now." Before I could argue, the rumbling grew louder, and the walls of the chamber began to crack. It was as if the ancient city itself was warning us not to disturb its secrets. I grabbed the captain's arm and pulled him back just as a large piece of the ceiling collapsed, narrowly missing us. "Captain, we have to go," I shouted again, this time with more urgency. He hesitated for a moment, then nodded reluctantly. Together, we sprinted back toward the entrance, dodging falling debris and trying to keep our footing on the shaking ground. When we finally emerged from the chamber, the rest of the crew was waiting for us at the entrance to the ruins. Their faces were pale with fear as the entire island seemed to be collapsing around us. Without a word, we ran toward the shore, the sound of crumbling stone and crashing waves echoing in our ears. By the time we reached the boat, the island was beginning to sink into the sea. We rowed as fast as we could, the water churning violently beneath us. As we watched, the ruins disappeared beneath the waves, leaving no trace of the ancient city that had once stood there. Back on the ship, we were all shaken by what had happened. The crew gathered on the deck, staring silently at the place where the island had been. Captain Rowan stood at the helm, his eyes fixed on the horizon, lost in thought. I could see the weight of what we had found and what we had lost on his shoulders. Later that night, as the crew slept, I approached the captain. "What now?" I asked quietly. He sighed, running a hand through his thick beard. "We came so close," he said. "We found the city, but we barely escaped with our lives. The knowledge we sought, it's gone, buried beneath the sea." I nodded, understanding the disappointment he felt. But there was something else, something more. "We may have lost the treasure," I said, "but we still have the map and the stone. There could be other places like this, other lost cities waiting to be discovered." The captain looked at me, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "You're right," he said slowly. "This wasn't the end of the journey, it was just the beginning." And so, we set sail once again, our spirits renewed by the promise of new adventures. The sea was vast, and the world was full of mysteries waiting to be uncovered. We didn't know where our next journey would take us, but that was the beauty of it. The unknown was what drove us forward. Over the next few months, we traveled to distant lands, following the clues left on the map. Each new destination brought its own challenges and discoveries. We encountered tribes who had never seen outsiders, navigated through treacherous waters filled with hidden reefs, and survived storms that nearly tore our ship apart. But through it all, we never lost sight of our goal: to unlock the secrets of the ancient civilization that had once ruled the seas. One of the most remarkable places we visited was an island that seemed to exist outside of time. The people there lived in harmony with nature, their culture untouched by the modern world. They welcomed us with open arms, sharing their knowledge and their stories. It was here that we found another piece of the puzzle, an ancient artifact that matched the stone we had found on the first island. This one was a small, golden disc engraved with the same mysterious symbols. The village elder, a wise and kind man, told us that the disc was part of a larger collection of artifacts scattered across the seas. These objects, he said, hold the key to understanding the lost civilization. They are pieces of a map, not a physical one, but a map of knowledge. Only when they are all brought together will their true purpose be revealed. His words filled us with a renewed sense of purpose. We knew that our journey was far from over, but we were getting closer with each step. The artifacts we had found were more than just relics. They were the keys to unlocking a forgotten history, one that could change the world as we knew it. As we sailed away from the island, I couldn't help but feel a sense of awe at the vastness of the world and the secrets it held. There was so much we didn't know, so much we had yet to discover. But for the first time in my life, I felt like I was part of something bigger than myself. Part of a quest that could reshape the way we understood our past and perhaps even our future. One night, as I stood on the deck of the ship, staring out at the endless horizon, Captain Rowan joined me. "You've come a long way since that day on the docks," he said with a smile. I laughed. I had no idea what I was getting myself into back then. "None of us did," he replied, his gaze fixed on the stars above. "But that's the beauty of it, isn't it? The unknown. The adventure." We stood in silence for a while, the sound of the waves lapping against the ship, the only sound. Then, Captain Rowan spoke again. "I don't know where this journey will take us, but I'm glad you're part of it. You've proven yourself to be a true sailor, Ben, and a true explorer." His words meant more to me than I could express. I had left my village in search of adventure, and I had found more than I ever could have imagined. But along the way, I had also found something else. Something I hadn't expected. I had found a sense of belonging, a sense of purpose. I had found a family in the crew of the Silver Wind. The next morning, we continued our journey, the wind filling our sails as we sailed toward the next unknown destination. There were still many mysteries to uncover, many challenges to face, but I was ready for whatever lay ahead. Our adventures continued for years, and with each new discovery, we pieced together more of the lost civilization's history. We found more artifacts, each one bringing us closer to understanding the full picture. Some of the islands we visited were inhabited, others were deserted and overgrown. But all of them held clues that led us deeper into the mystery. As time went on, the crew of the Silver Wind grew older, and some of them retired or left to start new lives on the islands we visited. But Captain Rowan and I remained, driven by the same desire to see the journey through to the end. We knew that the answers we sought were out there, waiting to be found. And then, one fateful day, we found it. We had been following the trail of artifacts for years, and it had led us to a remote part of the ocean, far from any known trade routes or civilizations. The sea here was calm, almost unnaturally so, and the sky was clear. It was as if the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for us to make the final discovery. As we sailed closer to the coordinates marked on our map, we saw it. A massive stone structure rising out of the water. It was unlike anything we had ever seen before. An ancient temple, half submerged in the ocean, its walls covered in the same symbols that adorned the artifacts we had collected. We anchored the ship and rowed to the temple, our hearts pounding with anticipation. This was it. The final piece of the puzzle. The entrance to the temple was guarded by two massive stone statues, their faces worn by time but still imposing. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of salt and ancient stone. The walls were lined with carvings that told the story of the lost civilization, how they had risen to power, how they had harnessed the forces of nature, and how, in the end, their knowledge had been lost to the sea. At the center of the temple was a massive altar, and on it lay a collection of golden discs, each one engraved with the same symbols we had seen on the artifacts. We placed the artifacts we had collected on the altar, and as we did, the room began to glow with a soft, golden light. Suddenly, the walls of the temple seemed to come alive, the carvings shifting and changing before our eyes. They showed the rise and fall of the lost civilization, their knowledge passed down through the ages, hidden in the artifacts we had discovered. It was then that we realized the true purpose of our journey. The lost civilization had not just been searching for power, they had been searching for a way to pass their knowledge on to future generations, to ensure that their legacy would live on. And now, that knowledge was ours. As we stood in the temple, surrounded by the ancient wisdom of the lost civilization, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. We had done it. We had uncovered the secrets of the past, and in doing so, we had changed the course of our own future. Captain Rowan placed a hand on my shoulder. "We did it, lad," he said softly. I nodded, unable to find the words to express what I was feeling. We had come so far, faced so many challenges, and now we had finally reached the end of our journey. But as I looked out at the horizon, I realized that this wasn't the end. Not really. There would always be new adventures, new mysteries to uncover. The world was vast, and there was still so much we didn't know. And so, as we sailed away from the temple, leaving the lost civilization behind us, I knew that our journey was far from over. There would always be more to discover, more to explore. The sea, after all, is endless.